Welcome, Most Determined Soul here. We're here to talk about the sexualizing of women in fighting games. It's a mixed cultural thing that has happened where historically there's a lot of marketing factors that go into why this has happened. Um, Maybe some of the things from the earlier days had caused this to happen. And there's just a whole lot of stuff and a whole lot of reasons on why. There's a whole lot of sexually explicit things that make the FGC down bad right now. The FGC didn't really start this trend necessarily, but there's a lot of roots, down bad roots within the FGC that causes us to go, wow, why are you like this? Why is the FGC like this? So stick around. Let's talk about why the FGC is so down bad. So one of the parts that I'm willing to argue with anybody is the early fighting game culture in the arcades. It was filled with a whole lot of young guys, and interestingly enough, the industry leaned into exaggerated, eye-catching characters. So we're talking about the Chun-Lis, the Cammys, the Katanas, the Jades. Who else was out there during that time? But you cannot deny that was what's going on during that time. So you can blame all the millennials out there. You can blame Gen X. I think I remember during this time you saw a lot of that in Duke Nukem. Remember, that's not even a fighting game. There was a lot of misogyny within Duke Nukem that was like, yo, bro, what's going on with that? And the rule of thumb was, the edgier it was, the better during this time. And that ultimately you're spread to all games of the era. Let's look at Killer Instincts. Yo, Killer Instincts 2 Gold, daggone Orchid had all of her butt cheeks out. Like, come on. One of her fatalities, when they had fatalities in Killer Instincts, was showing her boobs off. Like, yo, that's insane, right? I think we all can agree that it's pretty insane for any character to flash somebody as a fatality. But I definitely remember that, and I was so for that as a kid, you know. Same thing with Mortal Kombat. They didn't necessarily do all that, but pretty much all the female ninjas had some type of bathing suit slash thong thing on, and it's like, that's insane. The only time Mortal Kombat didn't really overly sexualized characters like that was with Sonya Blade in the first one. She just had a regular exercise outfit on and it was okay. But then all of a sudden she got sexy in Mortal Kombat 3, right? And then, like you said, all the other ninjas in Mortal Kombat 2 had that little thongs and had the butt cheeks out. So this has been going on for a very, very long time. It just ultimately gradually evolved, just like inflation. No, sexualization in fighting games is just inflation of sex. That's the best way we can describe it. It's just inflation of sex. That's all it is. But yes, it didn't just start happening. It started happening all the way back in the early 1990s. So the next thing that was a major influence within the gaming department of the FGC, if you want to call it that, was the influence of anime and comics. Let's take Spawn, for example. Woo! Spawn in the 90s, it was risque. Risque. Same thing with those Heavy Metal 2000 comics, risque, and that ultimately influenced a lot of the games that we played. But one of the biggest influences that was there was anime. And we all know how anime is, right? And I know some of you guys are like, no, we weren't influenced by hentai. I don't watch hentai. That's not the reason. No, not hentai. I would have to agree with you on that. The issue is that anime has always had fan service. Can we agree with that? It's always had some sort of fan service that was in place. Look at Street Fighter anime that released. They had that shower scene with Chun-Li. Like, why was there a shower scene with Chun-Li? That makes absolutely no sense. But there was a shower scene for Chun-Li. Same thing with Battle Arena Toshinden, right? They had Sophie, and again, her butt cheeks were out. Why would you draw it like that? Alongside with all the other fan service style anime that was released in the 90s going into the 2000s. I know some of you guys out there is like, well, what about this anime? What about that anime? And you were just introduced to anime in the early 2000s. But the 90s had a lot of risque anime, and it had a lot of fan service, and that ultimately influenced characters like Mai. Mai was one of the first characters that had jiggle physics. She had 2D jiggle physics in Fatal Fury. I think it was Fatal Fury 2, if I'm not mistaken, that she first was introduced, but she had the jiggle physics. Then we have Blue Mary. She also was busty in one of the games. You knock her off the edge, and guess what? She pops up and goes, oh, and she like tries to cover up. And same thing with Mai. She gets knocked off the edge of that stage, and her butt pops out. I thought that was kind of funny that it does that, but that was a small step closer to being that much more down bad in gaming. So that influence of anime and having fan service was definitely there, and we saw it in all our games. And that almost includes like games like Dead or Alive. As much as we don't want to say Dead or Alive has fan service, it has a lot of anime, there it is. It has a lot of anime influence. Look at the lady's eyes. They're very big, and then they're very shapy and curvy, very similar to some of the anime styles that were out during that time. So it definitely influenced our games that we play today. The biggest one, I would think, even though this is like my third point, it's still a very, very big point. Guys, we're freaking dudes. Sex sells, man. The biggest market of that time in the 90s and early 2000s was the male market. For decades, gaming was marketed to men, and publishers leaned into the idea that sex sells. Like, what else do you want me to say? Even box art and promotional art often featured female characters overly exposed. I remember the game Versus. I don't know if anybody remembers that game, but the cover art for it was a lady, and she had her hat backwards, she had a midriff shirt, she had her pants sagging ever so slightly, and you could see her thong. I'm like, what is this? You know? But that was in the 90s. And then, you know, with Mortal Kombat 3, you seen Sindel floating. She's a bad guy because her hair is gray and she has a black streak in the middle of it, but you see a lot of leg, you see a lot of thigh. We see Cammy. She started to be, I want to say she was the poster girl because you still had Chun-Li, but she started to be a little bit more prevalent in Street Fighter. You also had, you know, Marvel vs. Capcom, and you had Chun-Li and Mai smashing their chests together. And that was like promotional material. Like, what are we doing? What are we doing right now in the year of our Lord 1990 whatever? You know, what are we doing in the year of our Lord 2000 and whatever? They were just overly sexualized and ultimately making people that much more down by that and having the expectations that games should have more sexualized things. It is like a regular thing for the FGC now. The next part there that we'll hit on is the evolution of the 3D graphic. I know you guys in chat have been talking saying DOA, 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 but yeah, you're absolutely right. DOA was one of those games that took advantage of 3D graphics back in the day, taking those jiggle physics and setting a priority on the woman's bust. Every time they get hit, you know, you're like, yo, why, what are we doing? Or anytime they fall down, anytime they do bouncing. And that just ultimately became a staple in a lot of FGC games. I mean, look at Tekken 7. Josie, she's bouncy, very similar to the DOA graphics. A little bit too bouncy, and I really like it. I mean, we take Rival Schools. People tend to forget that Capcom 2 did some of that stuff besides the butt cheeks, you know? Even one of their creators, the person that created Chun-Li, the reason why some of the games were late because they were trying to make Chun-Li's thunder thighs perfect. Look at Tiffany from Rival Schools, right? That's where I was going with the Rival School statement. Tiffany, she is in a thong and very busty. It's like, what's going on in the world right now? But that was just what they were doing. That's what would sell in a lot of those games during that time. So the evolution of 3D graphics in the late 90s and the 2000s was definitely a reason why gamers were down bad, especially in the FGC. All right. The next thing that's there that I'll say is the community in the meme culture. The community, they do a lot of modding, and there's already fantasy in place. I think we can all agree that there's a big fantasy in place with a lot of this stuff. But the over-sexualizing of these characters come from that in the mods. We can take Tekken, for example. They have, there were a lot of mods where you can make the characters naked. You can take Street Fighter. Street Fighter 5 had a lot of mods where you can make the characters naked. I think that's really crazy that you were able to do that. I think that's some of the reason why we're saying within Capcom, they're like, hey, if you mod our game, I'm just letting you know, hey, we're just completely canceling you, and you cannot be a part of this great Capcom community that's here. You're not allowed to modify a lot of the things in the current games right now. Do people do it? Yes, they do. But you're not supposed to modify the game in any way for any of the characters right now. And then it goes into the memes. Meme culture is freaking wild right now in the FGC, and just gaming in general. Meme culture is wild. So let's take the character Manon, for example. There is a lot of there's a lot of memes out there of Manon being overly sexualized. I'll just leave it at that. Or our favorite muscle mommy, she has been overly sexualized because there's this fantasy of, ooh, I'm gonna get you in a headlock, boop, headlock, and I'm gonna squeeze your head with my thighs. You know, it kind of is what it is when it comes to these games and how they ultimately cater to their communities, and the communities take full advantage of this said fan service and take it to that next level. Kind of is what it is there. So we can take characters like Mai and Cammy. We always go back to them. There's tons of memes. There's tons of fan service. There's tons of fan art with all these characters. And they do what they do, baby. And that's kind of how we got here, you know, from early fighting games and them trying to sell to these communities, to this young demographic of males. Because of anime, it's definitely influenced the down badness of the FGC. The evolution of 3D graphics has definitely been one of those things that had influenced the down badness of the FGC. We had a whole lot of stuff that has caused the FGC to be down bad. So it's not one of those things that happened overnight. There were several things that got us here. It wasn't one of those things like, oh, you just made a game. Why is that game overly sexual? No. It gradually happened over time. Jeez Louise. It traces back to the early days of most fighting games like Street Fighter and Fatal Fury. But it really hits its stride in the 3D era with games like Tekken and Dead or Alive. Over time, it became ingrained in the genre's identity. And even now, with more diverse player base and industry shifts, the developers still include fan service in games like Street Fighter with its alternate costumes. I mean, we see my zip boobies, right? And mainly because they know it sells. There's been a little pushback, and more of the modern games have a little bit more moderate clothing on the characters, like Kimberly, Marisa. I mean, she's muscle mommy, but they did her justice, but it's not as overt as it was before. But overall, the down bad culture that's there, I think it's going to take another couple of years before that changes to where we respect the women, and for that matter, men, within the games that we play. Honestly, I would love to hear your take on this. Do you think we're improving? Do you think the down bad culture within the FGC will go away? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like. Don't forget to subscribe. I'm the most determined soul, CJ Berry, the leader of waves and waves of people in determination, success and victory. They'll block with your face. I'll see you guys on the next time. Peace the heck out.